The story begins with a man named Driscoll, who is negotiating the sale of an exotic animal. He is very nervous and says he drove without stopping because he wanted to get rid of that thing quickly. The buyer is known as Caprini, the leader of a freak show caravan. Driscoll is pleased to receive a large bundle of cash and begins counting it, until Caprini stabs him in the back and takes the money back. Shortly after, his assistant named Quinn arrives, and the two go to take a look at the creature. Quinn is horrified by the roar of the thing and pulls the chains with all his strength, trying to get it out of the truck, but the beast is very strong and skittish. Quinn ends up being hit in the eye by one of its enormous wings, and Caprini needs to shoot 2 more darts before bringing the beast down. After that, he calls the wealthy collector Cheng and informs him that he already has his precious item. The truck is found in the morning by a young man named Luke, who tows it to the small town of Reliance. Sheriff Atlas examines the vehicle but only finds a piece of fabric caught. At the station, his colleague Rogers is on a call with Pastor Owen, famous for his paranoia. This time, he is complaining about the arrival of the freak show and insists on speaking with the sheriff about it. Atlas asks Rogers to check the license plate of the abandoned truck and tells the pastor that he has already left. Despite that, he really goes to the freak show because he needs to check if they have the municipal licenses. Trying to hide his astonishment at the types he encounters there, Atlas asks to speak with the owner, but no one seems to know where he is. The sheriff takes the opportunity to keep an eye on the car plates, suspecting that the mysterious truck is connected to the fair. After asking several performers for help, who don't seem very keen to talk to him, Atlas is finally introduced to Mr. Caprini. He greets the sheriff warmly and seems very proud of his fair, guaranteeing that everything there is real. To prove what he says, he takes Atlas to see a fortune teller named Samara and asks him to give her his hand. The woman seems uncomfortable in Caprini's presence, but obeys without complaint. As soon as she touches the sheriff's palm, Samara flinches with a brief scream, and we see that she saw Atlas screaming in a state of despair. Not wanting to scare him, she says she saw nothing because the visions are blurry at first. Caprini seems eager to show everything to the sheriff, but his expression grows more serious when he asks to see a specific tent. The banner in front announces that it contains the greatest abomination that God ever made, and inside the tent, there is a covered cage. When Caprini slowly lifts the cloth, the sheriff's composure disappears, and it is evident that he is impressed by the creature. Quinn is right behind Caprini, and we see that he is now wearing an eye patch. Atlas questions whether it is safe to exhibit that type of animal in the middle of a crowded fair, but Caprini assures him it is secured and sedated. The sheriff is so shaken by it that he doesn't even wait to see the licenses and tells Caprini to bring them later. Meanwhile, Pastor Owen is organizing a counterattack against the freak show to prevent his flock from succumbing to the temptation of buying a ticket. He is very agitated and says that the soul of the town is at stake, but even his son Taylor doesn't seem to take him seriously. At the same time, young Jesse is about to leave and doesn't want to give his mother many details about where he is going. A bit suspicious, she asks him to stay away from Taylor, as the pastor's son is synonymous with trouble. Jesse says he won't go out with him, but we see that it is a lie. The two boys meet in an abandoned shack to drink secretly. At the station, Roger says he is still investigating the truck, but already claims it seems to have been stolen. He seems surprised by this, as the police in Reliance never have much work. The sheriff retorts that it is better that way, and then says he will drop by the fair that is just opened to the public. Pastor Owen set up a pulpit right at the entrance and is preaching to the faithful about the dangers of that sinful spectacle. What he doesn't know is that his son is with his friend in line at the entrance. Passing by the two, the sheriff takes the opportunity to confiscate Taylor's bottle of liquor. Quinn tries to help the boys and says the sheriff should leave them alone, but Atlas tells him not to get involved. When he walks away, Jesse shows he still has hidden alcohol in his jacket, and Quinn lets the two in for free. In the main tent, Caprini is presenting the new attraction with a grand performance. He warns that the cage behind him contains something so terrible it could provoke nightmares for weeks, and warns anyone with weak nerves to leave the tent. According to Caprini, the creature they will see is none other than the son of Satan. Upon hearing this, Taylor makes an inappropriate comment, complaining that he could have stayed home with his father if he was going to hear nonsense about demons. Atlas reprimands the boy again, and the show continues. Caprini points to Quinn and explains that he lost his eye for not giving the devil the respect he deserved. Therefore, he asks that no one make sudden movements and avoid irritating the beast. When the curtain rises, most of the audience is stunned, but many begin to take photos, and Taylor mocks the creature, throwing peanuts into the cage. As the monster bares its teeth for the camera flashes, the chain rattles so much that it causes the stake driven into the ground to tremble. Even Caprini begins to look anxious and whispers to Quinn, confirming that the beast was indeed sedated just minutes ago. Finally, the chain breaks, and the beast lunges at the bars, opening its cage without even needing to try too hard. Panic sets in immediately, and the audience rushes out of the tent, knocking down chairs and crashing into one another. The creature displays incredible strength and agility, throwing a man into the cage before flapping its wings and flying away. But not even that makes Taylor behave seriously. Running with Jesse to the shack, he laughs at the thought of his father's reaction and says he wants to keep drinking. Jesse is no longer so excited and prefers to stay indoors until they catch the winged monster. At the fair, the scene is one of devastation. Although no one was seriously injured in the commotion, many people need medical attention, and Samara says the performers are very scared. Luke volunteers to hunt the beast, but Atlas forbids him to intrude. Pastor Owen seizes the opportunity to rub in the sheriff's face that this could have been avoided if someone had listened to him. Caprini tries to convince Atlas that the animal is harmless, swearing that his words during the show were just part of the performance. He says it wouldn't be fair to put the little guy down and asks to leave the capture to him. The sheriff replies that Caprini is free to do his part, but warns that he will hunt that thing down the next morning. This gives the businessman less than 12 hours to retrieve the dragon he intends to sell to Mr. Cheng. When he talks about all that money that will be his, Quinn quickly corrects him, reminding him that the deal is to split it between the two. Tired of her boss's irresponsibility, Samara begins to pack her bags and is interrupted by him. Caprini tries to manipulate the fortune teller with guilt, saying that he took her in when everyone treated her like a freak. She agrees to help him find the beast, but warns that she will leave as soon as they manage to do so. Hours later, Jesse and Taylor are asleep in the shack when something enters through the wide-open door and approaches them. Taylor wakes up terrified, but then sees that it's just a dog, and the two feel relieved. Then Jesse starts to play with the visitor and notices that the dog is covered in blood. Taylor sees a foot lying on the ground and concludes that the dog brought that inside. Scared, the boys begin to back away from the animal, and suddenly something tears several boards from the wall behind them. The two huddle in the middle of the shack as the destruction continues, and the dragon appears on the roof. The dog is the first to take off as the monster jumps inside. Taylor is the second, running at full speed through the forest, while Jesse tries to keep up with him, calling his name. Seeing that thing coming toward him, he shuts himself inside the car. This causes the dragon to change victims and goes after Taylor, who is running by the creek. The boy tries to hide under a wooden bridge, but the dragon lands right where he is and contorts downward. From the car, Taylor hears his friend's screams, horrified. Meanwhile, Caprini brings a piece of the dragon's wing to Samara, which he must have lost when it crashed into the Ferris wheel during its escape. Adding this ingredient to the potion, Samara inhales the smoke and says she sees strings, waves, and a broken heart. Caprini gets irritated by the imprecision of the vision, but she reminds him that she has no control over these things. Taking advantage of the topic, he asks her what she saw in the sheriff's hand earlier, and she says it was death. In the morning, Jesse crawls out of the woods with great effort and is nearly run over by Luke, who immediately alerts the sheriff. Atlas is arriving when Rogers calls, saying the pastor is at the station, worried about his son who hasn't come home yet. In shock, Jesse stumbles over the words river and bridge until he calms down. He then tells that his friend was attacked and recounts that he heard the monster destroying the bridge. Atlas leaves the boy with Luke while he enters the forest, following the beast's trail to the creek, where he finds Taylor mutilated. Furthermore, the creek leads to a lake where more body parts are floating, probably from the same owner of that foot. Careful not to break the news to the pastor over the radio, Atlas informs Rogers that there are at least 2 victims on the scene. However, the pastor arrives right after, and no one can stop him from getting close to Taylor. He is completely devastated to see what happened to his son, blames the sheriff for not protecting his town, and swears vengeance against the leaders of that cursed fair. Analyzing the parts found in the lake, Atlas concludes that they were cut with a saw, deducing that this was not a victim of the monster. Moreover, there is a tear in the sleeve of the jacket, and Atlas fits the piece of fabric he found in the abandoned truck there. Caprini and Quinn are also in the forest, hiding behind trees and watching the police work. Quinn begins to worry when he realizes that the sheriff is fishing up the pieces of Driscoll. Caprini becomes furious at his assistant's incompetence and slaps his face. Quinn apologizes but says he doesn't want to be arrested at any cost and suggests leaving town as soon as possible. Caprini doesn't want to hear anything about that, always thinking about the $1 million sale to Mr. Chung. Samara calls Atlas to show him something she found in the old books. She discovered that the creature is the Jersey Devil, the 13th child of a woman named Leeds. Tired of so many babies, she swore she would only have another child if it were the devil himself, and ended up having her wish granted shortly after. The book also states that the monster is attracted to blood, even if it's not human, and is capable of smelling it from great distances. Shocked by the recent events, Jesse's mother decides to take him to the hospital in the neighboring town, and then stay at a relative's house until the monster is brought down. The boy becomes upset with her comments about Taylor, reminding her that he was his friend. His mother feels ashamed and regrets her coldness, stopping the car to apologize. She says she's only nervous because she doesn't want anything bad to happen to him, her beloved son. As soon as she finishes her sentence, the windshield is shattered by the dragon, which yanks Jesse out of the car. His mother exits the vehicle, desperate and unsure of where the thing took him. Then his body is thrown onto the hood of the car with a sudden thud. She runs there in tears and is also grabbed by the monster shortly after. At the station, Atlas gathers a group of men to capture the creature. Luke gets excited about the chance to defend the town and brings his trained dog, Bob. Arriving in the forest, the beast's roars are soon heard, not just by the vigilantes, but also by Caprini and Quinn. Then the roars begin to mix with painful whimpers, and Luke becomes very distressed, constantly calling for Bob. Fortunately, the dog returns unharmed, but Luke says he has never seen him so terrified and decides to take him home. Eager to find the monster before the police, Caprini and Quinn end up separating. Thinking he saw the dragon, Quinn pulls the trigger, and a scream of pain follows as the shot hits poor Rogers in the leg. Caprini also follows the sound and discovers Quinn's blunder. He offers to take Rogers to town, and Atlas refuses the offer, already suspicious of Caprini. However, Rogers insists that he accept, so the sheriff can continue hunting the creature until this is finished. The constant roars weigh heavily on the decision, and Atlas agrees to the plan. Caprini and Quinn help Rogers walk until he asks to rest for a moment. Quinn tries to cheer him up, pointing to the top of the Ferris wheel to show that they are almost there. But Caprini has other plans for the officer. Pretending to let him rest for a moment, he calls Quinn to the side to plot the scheme. He wants to use Rogers as bait because he knows the dragon will come soon, drawn by the injury on his leg. To prevent the officer from escaping, he hits him with one of the darts, but the effect is not very fast. Rogers immediately starts screaming for help, which attracts Atlas's attention. In distress, Caprini orders Quinn to deal with it, and he attacks Rogers with a knife. Growing increasingly impatient, Caprini commands him to strike more blows, as they need more blood to hasten the monster. This plan works, and the dragon soon shows its face. But Rogers has still not succumbed. He crawls to reach his gun and fires, scaring the monster away. By the time Atlas arrives, Rogers is already dead, and Caprini lies that the monster attacked them by surprise. Before the sheriff can question this version of events, screams of terror begin coming from the town, and he rushes there. The sheriff finds the fair under attack, with everyone running and screaming. He aims at the dragon, but cannot hit it. Samara is inconsolable to see that a young performer has been attacked. The girl does not survive, and even Quinn looks at his boss with disapproval. Determined to get his dragon back, Caprini starts mixing substances to make his darts more powerful. It is then that the phone rings, and Mr. Chung gives him an ultimatum. He wants the beast tomorrow or the deal is off. After Caprini hangs up, Quinn asks if he has already interpreted Samara's premonition. With little patience, he says he will recognize the signs when they come, forcing Quinn to accompany him back into the forest. It is there that Caprini attacks him by surprise, resorting to drastic measures now that time is running out. He ties him to the trunk of a tree and shows that these are the ropes, the creek is the waves, and the broken heart belongs to Quinn himself. While Caprini finishes off his loyal assistant, Atlas examines Rogers's body and discovers that he was hit by one of the darts. Caprini is lying in ambush next to Quinn and does not see the monster approaching from behind. With a swipe, the dragon knocks him down a slope and he nearly falls into the creek. But before the creature can pounce, Caprini manages to grab his gun again and hits one of the turbocharged darts into the beast, which collapses without delay this time. Exhausted, Caprini returns to the fair trailer, already giving orders to another helper, but who responds to him is Atlas. Revealing his discovery about Rogers, he punches the villain and takes him to the station. Caprini swears it was an accident, saying that Rogers got in the way, but the lie doesn't stick. Then the sheriff is suddenly struck on the head, and Caprini himself is shocked to see that it was the pastor. He locks Atlas in another cell and grabs Caprini's head against the bars, forcing the knife between his lips. Saying that the devil has a forked tongue, he cuts Caprini's out before opening the door. Raising the gun, the pastor announces that he will send him to hell, but the dragon doesn't let him have that on him. Breaking through the front of the station, it crashes through everything in its path until it enters the cell. While it devours Caprini, the pastor quickly closes the door and even fires his gun at the monster several times, with little effect. Then he grabs two of the turbocharged darts and plunges both into the beast's back, finally managing to bring it down. Luke arrives with several neighbors right after, and Owen announces that he killed the beast. He takes advantage of the moment of glory to preach, declaring that evil has not yet been extirpated, for all of this came to reliance with the freak show caravan. More people begin to gather in front of the station and help the pastor carry the monster to the middle of the fair, where Luke takes a photo session with his weapons and the slain demon. Still full of hate, Owen orders the faithful to burn not only the beast, but also those tents and all the pagans within them. The crowd obeys and begins to spread horror throughout the fair. Several performers are aflame when Atlas awakens, still trapped in the cell. Luke returns to fetch the pastor and show the work of the crew, unaware that the tarpaulin of the truck is slowly being pulled. As soon as he turns around and sees the thing waking up, Luke bolts, but Owen receives his fate with open arms. Distressed by the sounds he hears from inside the cell, Atlas breaks the lock with a shot and runs to the fair. Atlas dodges the flames while trying to hit the monster, still terrifying the place. He manages to find Samara, but a gas can explodes right after, and he loses consciousness for a few minutes. Dazed, he finds the fortune teller also unconscious and only manages to wake her up when the dragon is already eyeing Bodendom. Atlas does everything to provoke it while Samara runs, but the monster prefers to go after her. It chases her to the Ferris wheel, where one of her colleagues also tries to save her and ends up being eaten. The saga only comes to an end when Atlas runs over the dragon, pinning the beast between the truck and the Ferris wheel. The crash shakes the structure of the ride, and Samara warns him that everything is about to fall apart. But Atlas says he cannot leave because that would release his enemy. Ignoring Samara's pleas, he continues to press the accelerator until the Ferris wheel collapses. The dragon is finally defeated, but Atlas cannot withstand it either. Then, the sad vision of Samara occurs, and death comes to the sheriff.